in our lives, the most important thing in our lives is relationships. And it's interesting that talking about relationships, the first thing I have in my mind is what? Is Purim. Because Purim is all about relationships. How so? Because everything that we do in Purim is something that we have to relate to other people. It's not about ourselves. It's about everyone around us. So think about it. God gave us this holiday. Originally, what did he say? He says, I'm giving you the Torah. When did he give us the Torah? On Shavuot, right? But he gave us this Torah on the mountain of Sinai. And it says that Purim is greater than Yom Kippur. Why? Because the name for Yom Kippur is Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. So that means that Purim is even higher than Yom Kippur. So now what I'm going to do is go back to the story of Purim, go through the story, and explain it in a way that is a lot more deeper and more relationship-like. So we'll understand Purim in what we're saying. So going back to the year 357 BCE, that's when the story of Purim actually started. Now, going before that, we know that the first temple, 70 years before that, the first temple was destroyed by who? No. That was Babylonia. Very good. Babylonia. And who destroyed the first temple? Who was the person that destroyed the first temple? His name was Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a very, very powerful king, and his son Belshazzar took over after him. Now, here's what happens. There's a whole big fight in the kingdom because Cyrus decides that he's going to take over the kingdom. He was from Persia, and now the person in charge is Cyrus from Persia. So it's a whole different dynamics at this point. And Cyrus says to the Jews, you can go back and build the second temple. But there were people that were living at that time in Israel, and they didn't want the Jews to build the temple. So they went to the king and they told him what? They told him, do not let the Jews build the temple. They're going to rebel against you. And the king believed them, and so he stopped the building of the temple. And now who comes along? There's a mighty general, kills out the king, Cyrus, and takes over. And his name was Achashverosh. Some people say he was a fool. Some people say he was evil. We don't really know much about his character. But one thing we do know is that Achashverosh took over this kingdom. And when Achashverosh took over this kingdom, he married Vashti, who is the daughter of Belshazzar, the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia. And so she had royal blood. And that's how he was able to get into this position of being a king and not feeling that he's not anything important. He had, the lineage went through his wife, Vashti. So what happened? So now he realizes they're not going to build the temple. So he takes all the beautiful vessels from the temple and he says, I'm going to use it in my place and I'm going to make a party. I'm going to make a huge party for 180 days, and plus I will take the throne of Solomon, which Egypt stole, which I believe in Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe it was Nebuchadnezzar who stole it from Egypt when he conquered Egypt, and somehow it got into the hands of Achashverosh. So Solomon's throne was something very, very special. It had animals, gold animals on each of the steps, and if you went up the steps, it would take you to the next step. Now, when the king of Egypt, who stole it, tried to get on it, the animals threw him off, pushed him off. The same thing happened with Nebuchadnezzar. He also got thrown off. Achashverosh figured, oh, maybe I'll try, but he got thrown off. Then he got smarter. He says, I'm just going to make a replica. I'm not going to use the same one. I'm going to make a replica that looks just like that. And it'll work with the same mechanism. So he makes this big party. He makes this beautiful throne. He sits on top of the throne, and for 180 days he sits and he drinks and he has merry and he's happy. He's taken this throne and brought it. And you know what the interesting thing was? That most of the Jews actually went to the party too, because they also wanted to be part of that party. And what happens? Then what was I saying? So they come. So Jews come to the party, but Mordechai, who at that time was the head of the Sanhedrin originally 70 years ago. What was the Sanhedrin? Sanhedrin, judges. There were 70 judges that used to judge the Jewish people during the time of the temple. Mordechai was the last of them, so he must have been over 70 for sure at that point. And he told the Jews, do not go. Besides the point, Mordechai also knew 70 languages because they had to know all those languages to be the judge in the Sanhedrin. And he was a very great person, and he told them, don't go to the party. Achashverosh is serving non-kosher, and plus he has all the vessels of the temple. Why would you go to such a party? People went anyway. And this was a big mistake for the Jewish people at that point. Going forward, Achashverosh decides, okay, I'm done with my 180-day party. Let me make another party for a week for all my greatest guests from Shushan town, from our capital called Shushan. So he invites all the ministers, the high officials, and they're making another party for a whole week. I think it must have been either the 6th day or the 7th day of his party. He's drunk. He's been drinking for how many days? Yeah, can you imagine? And he says, I want Vashti to come and dance in front of me. And if we know his wife Vashti would love to do that. She had no problem with that. Because she was just as bad as he was, She doesn't bother her. But something happened to Vashti. She got leprosy that day. Leprosy is like a skin disease. And it's like blotches all over your body. Yeah. It's like a rash all over your body. Okay? So actually she got it for a specific reason. Because she had women that worked for her in her palace. And they were Jewish women, and she made sure that purposely Jewish women worked on Shabbos. She wanted them to work on Shabbos. That was her way of doing it. And God punished her by giving her leprosy, and therefore she couldn't come dance in front of Achashverosh. She says, no way in the world am I going. She did not want to go. And of course, Achashverosh got angry, and he didn't know what to do. And he calls his advisors together, and one of his advisors was who? Memuchan, who later was called Haman, right? So Memuchan says that, you see, if your wife doesn't listen to you, all the wives in the whole kingdom won't listen to their husbands. So she is an example. You need to do something with her. You need to get rid of her. And what happened? So Achashverosh made sure that Vashti was hung, because that was the punishment in those days to kill people. They hung people on a tree or whatever, however they hung people. So after Vashti was hung, the next morning, of course, he wakes up, and Achashverosh is drunk anymore? No, he's already finished with his drinking. So he wakes up in the morning and he says, I don't have Vashti. What am I going to do? No royalty, no nothing. Not a pretty wife, nothing. What am I going to do? So they decide to send out people all over the land and get women to come to a party. And he's going to pick who he wants as his wife. So they went out and they found a lot of people. In the meantime, you know the whole story. Who did he find? Esther. He found Esther. And Esther was the niece of who? Mordechai. Bye. And who was Mordechai? Mordechai was the person from the Sanhedrin, like we said before, right?
Judge.
Right. He was a judge from the Sanhedrin, exactly. And so what happens? So we go down and we see that Esther is No, she's going down. So Esther was taken to the king's palace, and she was interviewed just like all the other women. It took them, I don't know, a couple of days until they put different perfumes on them. In those days, they would put different perfumes and different makeups and whatever, and Esther didn't want any, but...
Interview for what? I'm sorry.
To be a queen.
But you said he lost his royalty, so he's not king anymore.
No, he's still the king. Nobody told him anything. He says, no, I'm the king. It doesn't matter if I don't have Vashti.
Oh.
So he was upset that he didn't have a wife that was royalty. Because the whole idea to begin with, when he became king, he says, I have a wife that's royalty. But now, even though he's king still, he still remains king. He's still powerful in the country. So they chose Esther to be the queen. And Esther became the queen. I think it's crooked, maybe, no?
What?
Esther became the queen.
No, you asked something, so...
Oh, yeah, I got it.
So... I thought.
But you're still kind of in the center. Okay.
Anyway, so it's okay now?
Yeah.
So Esther came to the palace and she didn't tell Achashverosh that she was Jewish because she didn't want to make any problems. In the meantime, she's told Achashverosh to take Mordechai as second to the king or as an advisor, to take him as an advisor. Why? Because she said regular kings have Jewish advisor. She gave an example, like Daniel. You know Daniel? So he was a Jewish advisor to the king. And so she said, you saw like Daniel, we'll take him as an advisor. He said, okay, fine. So Mordechai stayed near the king's palace, by the gate of the king's palace. And at one point, he heard two people, Bixen and Seresh, talking bad about the king and saying they're going to poison him. And he ran to Esther, and Esther told Mordechai, and therefore Mordechai saved the king's life. So we understand that Mordechai did something good for the king. And how did he understand what these people were talking? Because he spoke 70 languages. They were speaking Tarshish. It was some kind of African language. I don't know exactly which language it was, but he understood their language. So what happens now? Who comes along? Haman. Haman is a person that was the one who advised him to kill his wife. So he got a very high position now. And he was not a very nice person. And he definitely did not like Mordechai. What was the reason that Haman didn't like Mordechai?
Something was in the past. Something
Okay, so there's a story that happened in the past. Yes, there's a story that happened in the past. They were both walking in the past. They were both walking in the desert, and of course Haman finished all his water, and Mordechai gave him part of his water, and he said, "If I give you my water, you have to write on my shoe that you're my slave." So he wasn't too happy with Mordechai. And besides the point, Haman had like a big idol on his chest, and he told everybody to bow to him. And of course, Mordechai didn't bow to him. He was very angry. He says, "Who's this Mordechai? Who's this guy? Mordechai HaYehudi." He called him Mordechai the Jew. It's very interesting how the name Jew came about. The word Yehudi is from Judea. Judea is where the Jews lived. What happened? In Israel, before the Jews were exiled, there were 10 tribes and 2 tribes. They got separated. Because after King Solomon, his son became king, and some other person wanted to be king too. So there was a civil war, and two tribes went with one king, and 10 tribes went with another king, and somehow, sooner or later, those 10 tribes were taken into exile. The 2 tribes still remained. Who were the 2 tribes? One was Yehuda. Levi was a part of Levi, but not the whole Levi. So it was Yehuda, which is Judah, and Benjamin, which is Binyamin. But they went by Yehuda because he was the bigger tribe. So that's why they call the place where they lived Judea, like Yehuda, right?
Which
the place of
king
Yehuda.
did they go with? Solomon's son?
Solomon's son, right.
Okay.
Right, Rehoboam. And the other king was Yerovam. And Yerovam was not a very good person, and everybody from the 10 tribes, they started worshiping idols eventually, and God got upset, and they went into exile. But Judeans, meaning Yehuda and Benjamin, and little pieces of Levi. Why little pieces of Levi? Because the Levi lived all over. They were the teachers. So they lived everywhere. So some of the Levium went with the 10 tribes, and some of the Levium went with the 2 tribes.
Why 10 tribes went with a bad one? And only
They,
two-
because these 10 tribes supported this guy, and these 2 tribes supported Solomon's son. That's why it happened that way.
More bad people.
I guess that's the usual, right? So more
Yes,
people go
you know.
with the bad person, right? Anyhow, whatever the case is, the Jews sinned also now, and they were also thrown out of Israel, the other 2, which is why we call Jews, Judea, Jew, right? And who is the original Jew? Yehuda. Yehuda was the one who defended his younger brother, Binyamin. He took responsibility for Binyamin when? When he came before his brother Joseph. He didn't know it was his brother. He said, I am responsible for my brother. And that's when this whole thing of Yehuda will be the king. Yehuda is a kingly personality. And therefore from his family comes the royalty, comes King David, etc. And all the royalty comes from there. But because the 10 tribes did not want to listen, they went with their own king, and eventually they got thrown out of the place. So going back to Mordechai, Mordechai actually was Ishimini. He was from Benjamin. He was not from Judah. But he was called Mordechai Yehudi because he was from the complete people of Yehuda. In other words, Benjamin went under Yehuda.
You mean
Under the umbrella of
one
Yehuda.
family, you mean?
It became like one unit. So they were called, at that time, they were called Yehudim.
But they were
Jews.
relative to the, no?
No, everybody was relatives. I mean, Jews are all relatives. But this is two tribes went together. Okay? So anyhow, but they called it under the main tribe, which is Judea. That's why when you say Judea and Samaria on the West Bank, you should know that Judea belonged to the Jews originally, belonged to the tribe of Yehuda. That's the Judea and Samaria. Yehuda v'Shomron, right? Yehuda v'Shomron. Anyhow, so that's where the name Jew comes from. It comes from Yehudi.
Yehudi.
Right, Yehudi. Yehudi means Jew.
Bigudi.
Right. Like they say, Yid, a Yid. It's in Yiddish, right? But in English, it's a Jew.
Interesting.
Anyway, so going back to Mordechai, what was with Mordechai? Mordechai was, so he saved the king's life, and he did not bow to Haman, and Haman said, Mordechai's not bowing to you. He's from the Jews. He's from those Jews that are spread all over the kingdom. We don't want them. Why don't they want the Jews? What was the problem with the Jews? Who was Haman from? What nation was he from? Amalek. Very good. Amalek. Amalek is from Esav. Esav and Yaakov were brothers. Remember the beginning of the story, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? So Jacob had a brother, Esav. Okay? Esav, grandson, was called Amalek. Now, what did Amalek do that was so bad when the Jews came out of Egypt? Does anyone remember the story?
He killed.
They came to fight. They came to fight the Jews. What did it mean they came to fight the Jews? Think about it. Amalek was like all the way on one side. The Jews were all the way on the other side. Why did they come all the way from where they were all the way a few countries over to fight with the Jews?
They need the land.
No, they didn't need any land. That's what's so funny. They didn't need the Jews.
Power?
The Jews were not going through their land. The Jews were going a complete different way, and they came anyhow. Okay, maybe power, but think about it this way. The story with Amalek is, if there's a bathtub, and it's very, very, very hot, and a person puts his toe in there, what's going to happen to the toe? It's going to burn.
Yeah.
But then you can put your rest of your body in there because it cooled off already. Amalek wanted to cool everyone off to the Jews. Why? Because Egypt just fought against the Jews and the Israelites won. How is that possible? Egypt is the most powerful country in the world. And here comes Amalek and wants to fight the Jews. Why? Because they saw that what the Jews did, and they didn't want them to be so powerful. They wanted to come. Jealousy, maybe,
hatred.
Yeah,
everything.
Yeah, hatred, whatever, all together.
But they all were Jews, apparently. Different bride. Different bride.
No. I'm talking about the Jews in Egypt, when they came out of Egypt. So originally, Amalek fought against the Jews. Why? Because he wanted to cool off. And Amalek is the idea of cooling off. Amalek lives all the time. Amalek lives always in us, right? It's something that cools us off. So how can you destroy the Jewish nation? By a lot. Why by a lot? Because a lot is by chance. And by chance is above nature. And he understood that the Jewish people, you can't destroy through nature. It has to be a little bit different than nature. So what did he do? He drew lots, and what month did he come out on? It came out on Adar, on the month of Adar. And in the month of Adar, he said, nothing happened that's good. Only thing that happened is Moses passed away. But what he didn't pay attention is that Moses was also born on this day. Not only that he passed away.
Рожден и умер погиб в один Пурим. 7 Адара, по-моему, да? 7 Адара.
I have this on. Okay, so the problem is that he didn't realize that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on this day too, not just that he passed away.
7, yeah?
On the 7th of Adar. And so he chose the 7th of Adar to make this, not the 7th, he chose not the 7th, he chose the 13th of Adar. Because for non-Jews, the number 13 is not so lucky. But for the Jews, we know that the number 13 is very lucky.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Interesting.
So
I
anyway.
got the 9.
Huh?
9 is a good number.
13 for Jewish people is a very good number because there's 13 attributes of mercy of God.
What does a 9 mean?
9 is another number. We'll talk about that another time because numbers are all very interesting. That's a whole discussion in itself, okay? So he chose the 13th of Adar. He says, he went to King Ahasuerus and he says, one nation, they're all over the place. Can I kill them out? Ahasuerus says, here, take my ring. Do whatever you want. Didn't care. Didn't bother him. I don't want your gold and silver. I don't want you to bribe me. I don't want anything. Just go and kill them. So he gave him a signet ring. He wrote an edict that on the 13th of Adar, we will fight against the Jews and kill them all out. So Mordechai finds out about it, and he goes to Queen Esther. And he says to Queen Esther, he says, look what's going on. You need to go to the king. You need to plead for our people. She says, I don't know. I wasn't even told by the king. For the past few weeks, the king didn't call me. And if I go now, unless he puts out a scepter, he can kill me too. So he says, you weren't put here by chance. There's definitely some sort of reason that you were put here. And if you don't do it, somebody else will. So you need to, if you want to stay, don't think that you're so safe in this place either. So she decided, she said, okay. She says, I will fast for 3 days. And let all the Jewish people, gather all the Jewish people to fast for 3 days. And then I will go to King Ahasuerus and gather the children that they should pray and that I should have luck. So at the end of 3 days, she goes to the king, and what happens?
Why she fast for 3
The
days?
king puts out the scepter.
He talked to her.
Yeah.
Why
Put out a
why
scepter.
did she fast for 3 days and
Is
have
it a
the
mitzvah
whole
considered?
Israeli people?
Everyone to fast for 3 days because she realized that there must be a reason that someone needs to kill out the Jewish people. Because if the Jewish people were fine and everything was okay, it wouldn't happen. So because she realized that something must be wrong with the Jewish people, they need to fast and do tshuva. Because fasting is the act of tshuva, repentance, to be better. Right, to turn to be better.
Why through the whole history of Jews, somebody wants to
Они
kill
себя ощущают.
That's a very interesting question. It's a very interesting question. We'll go into that another time. We'll talk about anti-Semitism.
Not because of the Jews who were rich.
I
they
must
wanted
do
to
that for
possess their
There's
land.
always a reason. There's always a reason. It's not just about rich. Even if they're rich or they're poor or they do all the mitzvahs, so they don't do any of the mitzvahs. There's always somebody that's going to come up and want to destroy the Jewish people. That's
why they call
anti-Semitism.
chosen people?
That's another story. We'll go into that another time. It's a very long process. I have to make a whole class on it, okay? So make sure that we remember to do a class on that, anti-Semitism. Anyhow, so going back to the story of Purim, so she, after 3 days, she comes to King Achashverosh, she puts out a scepter, and she says to him, please come to a party that I'll prepare tonight for you, and bring Haman with you. And she makes the party for them, and she comes to the party with them, and they sit and they drink, and he says, what do you want? He says, come to a party tomorrow night. Okay. That night, everything turned around. The king could not sleep. Now, when it says the king, it doesn't necessarily mean Achashverosh.
The God.
It could be God. Why? Because if you notice that there's not one word of God in the whole Megillah. It doesn't say God in the Megillah. Why? Why doesn't it say God's name in the Megillah?
There's a hidden miracle. Hidden, no?
It's hidden, number one. And number two, because the name of God is a name. If there's no name, remember we learned it once? It's the essence. So the essence of God is in that Megillah. That means it's even higher than God's name. Because when you call someone, you're actually giving them a personality. But if you want to go higher than their personality, you don't even say their name.
You have to read twice Megillah.
Yeah. First night.
What if you read the one?
It's a story of Esther. Megillah is the story of Esther. Okay? So now what happens is that we are coming to the point that the king doesn't sleep at night. God doesn't sleep at night too. Why? Because the Jewish people are doing tshuva. Everybody's repenting. Everyone feels bad for anything that they did wrong. One thing that we understood that they did is they went to the party. And they shouldn't have gone to the party. Mm-hmm. But we don't know what else there was. But I'm sure there was other things. So therefore, God doesn't sleep and says, okay, I need to change something now. So also King Achashverosh doesn't sleep. And Achashverosh is woken up in the middle of the night. He's tossing and turning. And he tells one of his people to bring his book. And they open up the book, and what do they see in the book? It opens up to the page where it said, Mordechai saved the king's life. Did I ever give Mordechai a reward, the king asks? No, he did not give a reward to Mordechai. So he says, okay, he looks outside, and in the courtyard, he sees Haman. He tells this guard, go call Haman. Tell him to come in. What was Haman doing out there? He was preparing gallows. For who? For Mordechai. No, he was going to kill Mordechai first. Before he kills all the Jews, he was going to hang Mordechai. So he comes in, he brings him in, and he says, what should I do to a man that the king wants to honor? And Haman, of course, what is he thinking?
He was thinking about himself.
Aha! He says, put him on the king's clothes, put him on the king's crown, put him on the king's horse, take him around the town, and say, this is what is done to the man who saved the king's life. So what does Achashverosh say? Do it to Mordechai. Haman almost had a heart attack, right? It was like, oh my God. Right? He was so upset. He had to go around the next morning and take Mordechai and bring him to the king's palace, clean him, give him a haircut, put him on the king's clothes, put him on the king's, crown, put him on top of the king's horse, take him around town and say, this is what is done to the man who saved the king's life. And this is the man that God that the king wants to honor. So here he goes, and he's walking around, and he's so upset. There's a medrash that said that his daughter, I don't know if it's true or not, because this is maybe a kid's story, I have no idea, that his daughter put him...
From balcony, she something, no?
Yeah, no. She saw someone down on the bottom. She was on the second floor. She saw someone on the bottom. She thought that Haman was on the horse, and Mordechai was taking him around. So she took garbage, and she threw it on top of his head, and it was really Haman's head. So some people say that afterwards she jumped off the balcony because she was so upset. Whatever, I don't know if it's 100% true, but I heard such a thing. Anyway, so after that, that night, he has to go to a king's party again, right? So he runs home, quickly changes or whatever, and in the meantime, his wife is telling him, you're starting up with the Jews. You should know that anyone that starts up the Jews gets into trouble at the end. And he's like, be quiet, don't tell me anything. I don't want to hear anything. Because because his wife was actually not so stupid. She was a little smarter.
She
A very smart lady. No. Anyway, so he goes to the palace, and he comes to the party, and of course, Esther, what does she say? Ahasuerus asks her first, what would you like? Would you like half of my kingdom? I'll give you up to my half of my kingdom. No, I want to tell you, there's a man that wants to destroy all my people. And he says, who? Who wants to do such a crazy thing? How could that be? So she points to Haman, says, he's the one. And Ahasuerus gets so mad, he walks out on the balcony. In the meantime, Haman is pleading for his life to Esther. And Ahasuerus comes back in. He says, what, you want my wife too? So he gets really mad. And he gets his guards, and they hang Haman on the gallows that Mordechai was supposed to hang on. And so therefore now, Ahasuerus is very happy that Mordechai is going to get now Haman's house. And Queen Esther, his lovely queen, blah, 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 whatever. And the Jews in Shushan are very happy, but there's only one problem. What's the problem? There's still an edict that the Jews have to die on the 13th of Adar. So Ahasuerus says here, he gives to Mordechai his signet ring and said, do whatever you want. And Mordechai decides that he's going to tell an edict that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves. That's the only way to make it. So on the 13th of Adar, there's a big war, and whoever wanted to kill the Jews got killed, basically, because the Jews had better weapons, because they got the weapons from Mordechai, who got it from the king, from the whatever, and they killed all the people that wanted to kill the Jews, and it says that the 10 sons of Haman were hung on that day. And that was the 13th of Adar, and then the 14th of Adar in Shushan, they still had a war, because it didn't finish, and the Jewish people have on the 14th of Adar, we have a party, and all the walled cities and Shushan have their party on the 15th of Adar. That's why if you go to Jerusalem, you have 2 days of Adar, of Purim. Why? Because the second day, it's Shushan Purim. So it's only for the cities that are closed, because Jerusalem is a closed city, right? It has walls. Yeah. Anyway, so think about it this way. Let's get back to the point that we were trying to make. That we're trying to make that Purim was a holiday to have relations. Why? What's the relations that we have here? First of all, it's a relation between us and God. And secondly, it's the relation between us and everyone else. Because what do we do on Purim?
Give gifts to everybody.
Mishloach manot, right? We give special gifts, 2 kinds of foods to 2 people, right? And what else do we do?
Dress.
What? And we dress up. And why do we dress in costumes?
What costumes?
Why do we dress in costumes?
Because what kind of costume?
Any costume.
Carnival,
Doesn't matter.
Like carnival.
Yeah, any kind of costume.
Because they did it.
Carnival.
Yeah, but why, what's the idea of a mask?
Fool.
It is.
Not real, right? Not real. So in other words, the whole idea of the miracle of Purim is a miracle that's hidden. You can't see who the person is. You can't see what the good is. You can't see what the bad is until the end of Purim. And then it all gets revealed. And that's also the reason that we eat Hamantashen. Why?
It's hidden.
Because it's also hidden. Okay? We have everything that's hidden. Okay? So it's very important to understand that.
Oh, it's not the shape of Haman's hat.
It's also the shame of Haman's hat, but why is it hidden? Why is there the food, the good stuff inside, closed up? Right?
Like dumplings.
It's covered.
Dumplings.
Yeah, it's covered. Yeah, it's completely covered.
We also need to drink a lot.
We should drink. Why should we drink? Because we want to make festive meals. So you have to make a meal on Purim. So we have
Glasses of wine?
5 glasses of wine. Who told you?
Yeah, I was reading somewhere.
Oh, maybe you're talking about Pesach. I think you're talking about Pesach. Yeah. The 4 cups of wine on
remember it was
Pesach.
lots of-
Yeah. Anyhow, but you still can drink. You can still drink. It doesn't matter if it's wine or something else.
Okay.
But you should drink. Should be happy. You should be freilach, right? You should read the Megillah at least the first night and the second and the daytime
So it
from the night and
starts on
day.
when, on Tuesday?
So Wednesday night.
I start Wednesday night,
Yeah, until Thursday.
This week.
so read on
Next
Wednesday
week.
and
Okay.
Thursday. Okay.
Wednesday night till Thursday. So Wednesday night is the first time of reading, and Thursday we read it a second time. Why do we need to read it twice?
To do Ashra? How they go? Ara?
No, because they did one Purim and then
No.
Shushan.
No, Shushan Purim's another story. Why 2 on the same day?
Asra?
The reason you read it twice is because when you look at a story, you just look at the story as it is. But then you have to remind yourself of all the miracles that happened in the story. You have to look at it a second time to really look at it and say, oh, that's the way the story is. So that's why we read it twice. You also need, okay, so that, and we also have to give to two poor people, we have to give money to two poor people. So we see that everything's about relating to other people. You can't just be in your house on Purim and everything's okay. It's not about me. It's about what?
Us.
It's about us. Right. It's about relating to another person. Everything's about mine and yours. It's all together. Okay, so that's why Yom Kippur is not as important as Yom Kippurim. Purim. Why? Because it's Yom Kippurim. So Purim is a higher level. Why? Because when we connect to everybody else, we connect to God on a higher level, on a deeper level. It says that when Mashiach comes, what's going to happen? We'll have only 2 holidays. Does anyone know which 2 holidays we'll have when Mashiach comes? Purim and Hanukkah.
And Hanukkah.
That's it. That's it. All the other holidays will be not important
The
anymore.
happy ones.
Yeah. And it's not just that. It's because these holidays are how we connect to other people.
And I'm sorry, and also Av, 9th of Av.
Right. But that will be a holiday. Right. Exactly. Okay, but I'm just saying, but those are the main holidays that will be. And if we understand that Purim, it's also the word pur means a lot. So a lot means a chance, by chance. So when you do something by chance, that means it's higher than actually doing something the way it's supposed to be done. It's just random, right? So the idea is that Purim's miracle is a random miracle. It's not usual kind of miracle that you see of splitting of the sea or something like, God appears to everyone. And the interesting thing is why in the future we will have Purim is because Purim symbolizes how the future is going to be. When God took us out of Egypt, he gave us miracles, open miracles. Now, when we want to get to the Geula now, to the redemption now, it's not about miracles. It's about working on ourselves and doing more Torah and mitzvot to get to that point that godliness will be even in the Hamantash. That godliness will be even on this table. That everything will turn into 100% godliness. Yes?
Could you say then that, like, a person who is maybe, I don't know, an atheist, who, is a very, like, friendly people person, has great relationships with everyone, like, that's more important in God's eyes than to be, like, I don't know, a hermit or something and have, like, a really deep connection with God only?
Well, again, a person who has a connection to people will have a connection to God automatically. The atheist that you're talking about, which is interesting,
like
is not a real
agnostic or
atheist. He's an
something.
agnostic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what
They're-
he or she's saying about
Right,
themselves.
right, but they can't, but deep down they really believe in something. Because if you have connection to other people, you believe in something.
But God cares more about you connecting to other people
Right.
than you connecting to Him.
Because when you
So-
connect to other people, you are connecting to God automatically, because every person has a soul and we're all part of one being. So that's why it says the most important mitzvah is what? Hareini, what do you say in the morning? Hareini mekabelas alai mitzvahs aseh shel v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. I take upon myself every morning to love my fellow as myself. Definitely you have to love yourself too. But you have to love your fellow as yourself. Why? Because if you don't love your fellow as yourself, you can't pray.
Jews or
You can't pray.
everyone?
Everyone. We have to love every creature. Not just Jews, not just non-Jews. We have to love everything in this world. Every little thing has a purpose.
You said
A flower. You shouldn't be standing and crushing flowers because it has a purpose in this world too.
you said poor. Is it a chance? Means
Poor means by chance. Yeah.
But poor
Not
means
in
it's a
English.
different-
I know, which is in Hebrew. Purim means by
Is
chances.
it what language? Poor.
Poor by chance is in Persian. In Persian. Persian.
Oh, it's poor.
Yeah. Because this is the original thing that they used.
So this whole
Megillah.
Megillah happened between like 70 years between.
Well, so the Megillah happened towards the end of the 70 years, although they counted it wrong. They thought the 70 years were up already, but it wasn't. It was counted from the last people that went into exile, not from the time that the temple was destroyed. So, therefore, it was 70 years, and when the 70 years were up, Esther's son actually let the Jews go back and build the temple. She had a